Right. Good afternoon, everybody. We are super excited to have everybody here to discuss re-engaging residents in 2021. And we have with us here Matt and Dawn and Aaron. If you guys all want to jump in here as well. Wonderful.
Hey, Nick.
Thank you very much for jumping on, everybody, today. We got a really good response on this topic, and we are all super excited to talk with you guys today about, re-engaging residents in 2021. We know that it has been a interesting, past 12, 15, 18 months or so. With the way that things are going here, as of right now, we might have an interesting, handful of months here to come. We're super excited to have this conversation with you all today. A couple of kind of housekeeping items here. We are recording this webinar. So if you do have to jump off early or anything like that, or anybody else wants to see this, we will be sending it out to everybody who is attending and anybody that registered also. On the bottom, you will see a kind of Q&A section as well as a chat section. We cannot access the chat piece. So what we ask is that all of your questions go into that Q&A piece, and we will try to get them answered, as we move along here. But also, we'll go ahead and make sure that we get back to you on all of those questions as well. So we definitely encourage anything that you guys have to flow into that. With that, we'll kind of kick this off here. So my name is Nick Niemer. I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at LifeLoop. We are a operations communication and engagement software platform with a heavy focus, on life enrichment. We partner here with our good friends at Activity Connection. So we thought that they would be a great group to have join us to discuss, re-engaging residents in 2021. As well as Aaron here. And Aaron, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself, and then Matt and Dawn, if you guys want to introduce, then we'll just jump right in.
Thank you. My name's Aaron. I came into resident engagement in kind of an unusual way. I'm actually a physical therapist by trade. And back in 2002, I had an opportunity to become a wellness director at our Generations Portland community, which is called Cherrywood Village, and was able to kind of build a wellness program from the ground up. And I really fell in love with the whole wellness model. I've worked with older adults my whole career, and I feel really passionately about it. Then Generations kind of married the activities program to the wellness program, and we call it Vitality. So now I'm at what we call not the corporate level or the home office. I'm the director of Vitality for our 11 communities over 5 of the Western states.
Wonderful. And again, thanks so much for joining us here. Matthew?
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Nick. Thank you, everyone, for joining in today to be with us. I know you're all very busy, and we appreciate you taking the time. My name is Matthew Guilfoyle. I'm the president of Activity Connection. It's a family-owned business that was founded all the way back in 1999 with a heartwarming vision, believing people long in years should never be short on opportunities for growth, enrichment, and joy, no matter the setting in which they live. I think that's something that we can all share a belief in, right? ActivityConnection.com. We've been a leading resource serving activity and life enrichment pros as a virtual activity assistant for more than 20 years now. Right? And as president, I'm extremely proud to represent not only the organization, but the many amazing people we have working for the business, like Don Doran, our director of content, who's with us here today. You'll hear from her in just a bit. At my core as a professional, I'm a high-performance team builder who's made a career solving big problems with technology solutions. So it's my pleasure to be with you today. I'm looking forward to contributing to the conversation, and I hope to be able to provide at least a few insights that you can take away and find helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Matthew. And Dawn?
Thanks, Nick. Hi, my name is Dawn Doran. I'm the Director of Content at Activity Connection. Before joining Activity Connection full-time in 2016, I was an activity professional I worked for over 24 years in activities as an activity assistant, an activity director, and also in my later years as an activity consultant. I worked in all levels of care. Like Erin, I've always had a tremendous passion for seniors. And even, when I was a teenager, I often volunteered at where my mother worked. So I'm very delighted to be here to share some of my knowledge and experiences with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dawn. And, just again, real quick for those kind of jumping in a little bit late, there is this Q&A section down at the bottom where we will be kind of taking questions at the end and kind of filtering them in as we go as well. So make sure to put anything in that Q&A and not in the chat there also. And with that, we'll go ahead and, kick this off. So, as we look at re-engaging, the residents in 2021, and, now as we're getting towards the end, looking towards 2022, with a lot of different things going on and COVID still very much at the forefront, as life enrichment professionals, are looking at an audit of their resident programs, what are some of the things that they should, keep in mind, criteria they should use to kind of gauge their effectiveness and what they are offering, how, residents are, getting kind of their preferences to the activity groups and how we're kind of structuring that based on, not only their needs, but some of the things that are, going on in the community. So the hindrances possibly on group outings and things like this and having a lot of people in an area. So I think starting there, Erin, if you want to kind of jump in and talk a little bit to that, that would be great.
I think even like as we kind of go in and out of COVID, which we are experiencing at Cherrywood right now, we've had a resident test positive in the assisted living. We've had to go back to a COVID model of delivering vitality. I think being really flexible, being able to shift staffing around has been crucial within even a couple of days. We've done that this week. And then right away, I always feel like the first thing you should never neglect is movement. Of course, I'm a little biased that way, but the first thing we did in the assisted living was establish a schedule for hallway exercise and, get them in their doorways with their masks on. We have staff who are not vitality staff that are helping teach exercise right now. We also have a fitness trainer that we utilize on the independent side. So we're lucky that way. But I feel like the evidence is so strong about exercise that it not only helps, prevent physical decline, keeps them physically strong, but we also know that it improves your mental well-being, your emotional health. There's a social element to it. Even if they're not right next to each other, they can see each other. The teacher's kind of wandering the hall. I just think that that's always our first priority. We also do outdoor walks, like one-on-one with a staff member and a resident masked up so that they're getting outdoor time. I think if you focus on that right away, you can't really go wrong. And then you can build on things from that, hallway word games and stuff like that. But I think really keeping them moving is so crucial. I mean, we've seen so much decline in the residents over the past year and a half. And I just think we have to be really flexible this probably for the whole next year about into COVID programming and out of COVID programming. And so I've been on the ground working at Cherrywood because we've had some staffing challenges this year. And so I know firsthand kind of what y'all are going through and how hard it is. But yeah, I would say my first thing would be don't let them stop moving.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So is, kind of getting to that point a little bit deeper, what, we know it's all hands on deck at these communities right now. So how are you kind of engaging, like you said, some of those other staff to, get people to help them get out of their rooms in kind of these small areas, right? It's, with kind of the staffing shortages that we're seeing in this industry currently anyways, I'd assume it's all hands on deck.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the biggest priority right now, other than, keeping everything clean and safe and such.
Yeah, I've had to shift staff over from different areas to help. But also, if you get to know your colleagues in the other departments, we have a nurse who is really passionate about fitness, and he's allowed to be in that area because that's his work area. So he's actually helping us teach exercise classes, even if it's just 20 minutes, hallway to hallway. At least everybody's getting some movement. But really, as you get to know caregivers and nurses and even wait staff, and they all have talents and passions. And I think as we get to know each other, you can just pull each other in to help. We've had Vitality help serve meals. We've had the nurse help with exercise. We have servers help with bingo. I just think we all have to think of ourselves as Vitality or activities professionals right now.
Yep. Thinking outside the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Erin, I think that's great. What you're talking about, empowering all staff to contribute to activities and resident engagement, wellness activities. I'm just out of curiosity, did you face any big organizational challenges to making that a part of your culture, to get that off the ground? Or was it something that kind of happened, maybe it happened before COVID, maybe it was already part of your culture, or was it something that kind of spontaneously spun up out of maybe necessity from the pandemic? If you don't mind elaborating on that just a bit.
I feel really lucky to work at Generations because one of their key values is vitality, not just for resident engagement, but for staff engagement. We talk about it all the time with our staff about self-care and making time to have, fitness in your own life or mental health, and making sure staff have resources. And I think not to shift away from the residents, but I really think if we don't think of ourselves that way as, needing to take care of each other and help each other take care of ourselves, I think we're not able to help the residents. So yes, I think it's just part of the foundational culture at Generations, and it's one of the reasons I've loved working here.
That's great.
So Dawn, I'd love for you to kind of, with your background, elaborate a little bit on that same question. And, from, the head of content and activity connection, taking a little bit of what your clients are kind of looking for, or if they're coming to you kind of to get creative in some new ideas that they can utilize to, like I said, really re-engage this resident now.
I think the one thing I saw coming out from the pandemic was a need to be able to do programs in a room via like an in-house television.
Yeah.
And luckily, at Activity Connection, we have AC videos, we have slideshows, all, work great. And if you have the technology to be able to do a program and televise it on your in-house TV channel, that changed everything during COVID. And we received a lot of letters, thanking us for having so many programs that they could easily do and share that way. And also our assortment of puzzles. I mean, we have so many puzzles that we, provide every single month. And, they, would make puzzle packets to hand out. And from what I understand, so many residents enjoyed these puzzle packets so much that they continued it even when lockdown was over and they had regular programming. It was something they started to do to implement on the weekends.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think, that leads to a good point, right? Of, the things that we're seeing, come out of this or happen due to COVID are things that, aren't just going to go away, right? So, that's kind of the whole idea. It's reimagining this. And, I think what we're learning is that our residents in these communities are able to, utilize technology a lot better than we probably thought, and are, interested in thinking outside the box along with, your teams to kind of get some of these pieces going. So I think, Matthew, with your, as you discuss technology and how to utilize and leverage technology and things like that, what would you recommend to these folks, again, to, start looking at resident preferences, how to really get, the information that they, that you need from them to understand what they're looking for, and kind of utilizing technology to reshape this, not only during COVID, but, moving out and looking towards the future. Because I think we're going to see a lot of, as bad as things are, I think that there are some things that we're going to see really good come out of this from that understanding.
Oh yeah, invention is the mother of, or necessity is the mother of invention. Is that?
Sounds good to me.
So true. And you know, the chicken and the egg, which came first? What we really find, and on the other side, at least through the 2020 and 2021, as we come to the close of this round of our battle with this pandemic, is what it's shown is technology can really play a heavy role in all of this that we're discussing today. It's a key ingredient in this best practice that I would recommend today that Aaron has already touched on, which is we need to find ways to be flexible. To plan for the unknown is what we've really learned, because things change so quickly. And maybe in a previous life, I guess you could say pre-COVID, activity and life enrichment planning maybe was approached a bit differently, where you could really hopefully map things out a bit in advance. I think what we really saw at the beginning of this pandemic was folks really scrambling to recalibrate those activity calendars at large and for the individual residents. And then you start thinking about, what do those activities look like? Well, especially if there's going to be this tremendous ramp up in isolation, we can see how finding ways to deliver engagement services and activities via technology would really help that scenario. But what we also learned, interestingly enough, and coming from the technologist here, we're never going to get away from the need to have the tried and true printed activities in that same conversation, because so many of our subscribers and so many of our colleagues in the industry around the nation find themselves working within the entire spectrum of having access to technology or not. When I came to Activity Connection just over 3 years ago now, and having a heavy background in technology, it really was mind-blowing just how many folks are dealing with the no network scenario still today, for a number of reasons. Whether it's lack of funding, lack of technology gear, they just haven't built out a world-class network in their community, or maybe it's just a physical limitation. We've all been in those bunker-like rooms that just don't get a signal, for example. How do you support that? What we found is you have to have a multifaceted, diverse allotment of programs and activities that you have at your disposal, ready at your disposal for these scenarios, and then be ready to, I guess, form your plan of action when you see what the realities are that you're facing in your community that week or that month, because things have been prone to change so quickly, especially over these last 18 months.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, hit the nail on the head that a lot of the basics, right, are never going to go away, and we need to understand that, and they can be super beneficial to us right now, right? I mean, just getting back, like you said, getting out and going on a walk, doing these things, having them, anything and everything that we have taken for granted, right? In the years leading up to this, we're kind of getting back to those things, right?
Yes.
People going and eating outside. You see, like, people having picnics and things like this, right? So I think we got to get back to those pieces, and then looking, at technology to, really help with that in some cases, right? And then also drive, some further engagement, things as we kind of move forward.
Absolutely.
Aaron, I kind of look to you. Did you guys see any, did you guys see any struggles with like networks and things like that throughout this and trying to get information? And, what did you guys kind of do to overcome that? Because again, it's not, as Matthew alluded to, it's not necessarily, the infrastructure of the network. It can really be the buildings themselves, that we're seeing these issues in.
Yeah, and at Generations, we have a really wide variety of types of buildings in different areas of the country, and some of them are new and some of them are fairly old. Yeah. And the infrastructure is not great. And I mean, we have 2 communities that utilize resident engagement technology, but the rest just don't have it. And so we scrambled. We were scrambling. I was buying tablets in bulk when the pandemic started, because we needed to have a way for them to, FaceTime or, Zoom with their families and then doing window visits. And it was stressful.
Yeah.
So I feel like now, I'm thinking we were coming out of COVID, but probably not. I think, going forward, it's just not optional for this industry. And we have to look at Wi-Fi in every building and look at the hardware. And so it's something that we're looking at Generations.
And it could be a big positive for the industry, Aaron. I mean, it's I thought that it was just a shame as I've learned more about the industry, networked more, interacted with more of our subscribers, learned more about the unique obstacles or challenges faced at different senior living settings across the country. The challenges that we're facing as a group, the conversations like these that we're having as a group, the solutions that we're bubbling up to software as an industry, you can almost hang your hat on one of the big positives that have bubbled up as folks across the industry, hopefully now more than ever, recognizing just how important it is to appropriately budget for technology in your senior living community. It's not something that should be considered an aside. It's an essential ingredient into providing that flexibility, into empowering your staff, into ensuring that you can cover that full spectrum of need for whatever the scenario lays down in your community from week to week, that you need to kind of walk through in order to do your jobs. You have to have technology. And Aaron, that story that you just told, we see it on our side as well. There was several wonderful programs throughout the country that tried to get more tablets and technology devices in senior living communities across the country. But you can see if we're playing catch up, we're already behind when these things take place.
Yeah.
And if there's no budget, how are these being bought?
Yeah.
Right. It's we have so many of our folks, they're paying for their subscriptions out of their own pockets at times. It breaks my heart. And when I start thinking about technology, I'm wondering, well, shoot, where is that technology budget coming from the community if their subscription services are already coming out of their own pocket? So it's a challenge, it's a cultural thing, it's a mindset. I hope that we're seeing almost a paradigm shift in the industry where it becomes technology equipped as a foundation of enrichment services.
I agree. I also think we underestimated what our residents were capable of doing with technology because
yes,
they learned very quickly. And I think about that in terms of ageism in our industry a lot. Like, I think we under-challenge them physically. I think we under-challenge older adults intellectually. And with the technology thing, it was so obvious that they were able to get it. And I just think we should keep that in mind when we're programming and looking at technology programs.
I agree, Erin. My 93-year-old mother-in-law now understands how to use an iPad. We were trying to get her set up with an iPad for years, and she didn't want to use it. And then, of course, the pandemic came, and it was our only way to have a conversation with her, a virtual chat. So we set her up with an iPad, and now she uses an iPad, and 93 years old. And so I agree. We definitely, they definitely can learn new things. And you talked about the tablets being used for, virtual chats. But what the activity professionals are also discovering, the many ways that you can use the tablet for an activity once you mirror it to a television. I heard lots of stories about their discoveries of using apps on tablets when they weren't being used for virtual calls. So, it is an exciting time to see.
Exciting time, exciting trend. And we're talking about technology devices, but a key element in there as well is technology training for both the activity and enrichment staff, as well as person you're caring for that may be using that device for various reasons. So I want to share a story of another community. I won't offer their name, but it made me smile really big when I uncovered this approach they're taking. And of course, this is a story that's unique to their community. It sounds like they're really leaning into budgeting for technology, so far so that they are budgeting on the staff side as well. And they created a position called an RTA, a resident technology assistant. And that person kind of shares that burden with the activities and enrichment professionals, so that many of our activity enrichment pros in the industry have leveled up to become quasi-IT folks to make this happen. But if you have funding, if you have the culture, if it's at your disposal, think about that RTA model, the power of that. Think about that model extended to empowering all staff. Is there another staffer on your team that has technical chops that could help in that capacity already? It's just, it really dawned on me that is a wonderful approach to take, pairing technology, a technologist, with your activities and enrichment team to augment those capabilities and take it to the next level. I think that's something the industry could learn from there. But again, recognizing that's very unique and it's very dependent on the funds you have available and your culture as an organization.
Well, and what we've seen too, talking to a lot of our communities is, you do have residents in these communities that were tech savvy before this or have really taken to it, right? And so we've seen folks utilize those residents to, help kind of get that out, right? Their friend down the hall that might have been, very technology averse, right, and didn't want to do anything. Well, getting them involved, partnering them up to kind of help them through it. We've seen, a ton of that, and it gets a really good response, right? They love a peer to kind of work them through that understands the struggles that they had, that, we're doing this on the same level. So I think that's a huge piece. And it brings to the point, like some of the multi-generational things as well, right? I mean, how do you involve some of these, volunteers, high school kids, grade school kids, I mean, anything, right, to really help push this along. And it helps them as well, right? And, it's like my 8-year-old nephew can do more on an iPhone and a tablet than I've ever even seen. And so, I think we're kind of running back into the issues, right, of not being able to probably have some people come into the communities, but I think getting creative in those ways and the folks that you use, especially, if you're not able to get funding for that technology piece, there's a ton of stuff out there that you can kind of leverage to really drive this also. All right, so I'm going to kind of shift gears here a little bit, because I think this is a super important part of, this conversation. And I am seeing your guys' questions come through, so we'll get to those here shortly. But Aaron, I kind of wanted to discuss one thing, and you and I have talked about this a decent amount, but more than ever, right, we're seeing the social isolation and kind of the stagnation really accelerate cognitive decline and just health overall, right? And so with us kind of going possibly back into, a lockdown state, some of these different things, I think all the stuff that we're talking about, will help this, right? Because we really want to make sure that is not the case, and that we are getting people involved. But, you speak to your vitality program, and how do you utilize that to alleviate that? And how are you, I guess kind of, keeping track of those things, or really trying to pinpoint who might not be getting out there and really try to see this? Because I think one of the things that people don't think of enough is getting people into a social environment. Like you said, just getting them moving on a day-to-day can reduce medication, can, lengthen basically life, quality of life, all of these things. And I think, all of our generations across the board understand that more than ever, as we were put in that situation too. Yeah. So I think there's some empathy on our side for this, and how are we really need to focus on that resident to drive this. And how are you guys kind of looking at doing that today?
I think it's really important to kind of just go back to basics, like the one-to-one face-to-face visits, making sure that every resident is getting a visit. And we've been splitting up staff, assigning hallways to make sure that every resident is face-to-face with a vitality professional or, some other staff member that's kind of working in that capacity. that one-to-one, face-to-face interaction. Like we always say, every staff and resident interaction is a vitality moment. You've got to utilize that time you have with them to engage with them, assess them, because I think activities and vitality staff sometimes have the best bead on what is actually going on with a resident. They see decline first. They can see cognitive issues first because you really get to know them. And I think that continuing to try to connect one-on-one, and at the same time kind of drawing out of them what's important to them. I think we've been talking about this for the last year. Like in some ways, this one-to-one visits that we're kind of forced to do has been good because you've really gotten to know the residents and know what they're interested in and what engages them and what's exciting to them. And I think I'm always asking our staff to continually survey them, not issuing surveys all the time, but every time you're interacting, just like trying to get information from them about what they want and what feels purposeful to them. I mean, that in addition to just kind of utilizing that wellness model, like, are we addressing intellectual challenges? Are we addressing physical needs, social needs? I think the wellness model is just something that I always fall back on when I'm looking at programming, even whether we're in COVID or not. The principles are the same. At Generations, we kind of boiled it down to mind, body, spirit, and play. Like if you have those four things, even if that play moment is just one-on-one, hanging out with a resident, listening to music or something, like making sure we get those playful moments in there too.
I mean, like you said, I think it's getting back to those basics. I mean, how many of us, like I said, started going on walks way more than we ever did, or meeting friends in a parking lot? There's like just little things like that, and I think getting back to focusing on those is super important. And Dawn, kind of looking at that and touching a little bit on what Aaron mentioned, but some of the tips I guess you might have for the life enrichment teams and kind of revitalizing their programming and such, but also making sure to kind of hit on that multi-dimensional piece is super important. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit from you on some of the things you're hearing from your customers and some advice you might have for them in those areas.
First, I wanted to say that Aaron is absolutely correct. Getting back to basics is the most important, and spending time with the residents and getting to know them is really the foundation to any successful activity program. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. So, you have that information, what your residents want to like, you plan programs that they're interested, but you could make, little tweaks just to kind of make them a little bit more exciting or to draw attention to them. So a couple of my tips are, very simple, and activity professionals might already be doing this, but I thought it was worth mentioning, is using music. Using music as a way, when you have your program scheduled, depending on what program you have, you find some way to connect using music. And it could be just putting music on as you're bringing people to an activity, or it could be including music as a part of the activity. It's just that I found that is one way to kind of create some excitement about a program, is to use music in a different way. And thanks to technology, we have access to so much music through Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube. So we really have that opportunity to take a program to another level. And I just wanted to give some examples of some types of activities and how you could really think about, music to use to make it a little bit more exciting. For example, bocce. Bocce is a very popular game. I hear a lot of people play bocce. It was one of our favorite activities at the building where I work before coming to Activity Connection. Well, everyone knows that bocce is very popular in Italy. It's an Italian bowling game. Well, why not, elevate your bocce came by playing, Italian music while everyone's getting ready. And if you do that, what I find is residents start to look forward to that, and they start to associate music with a particular program. So if you got bocce set up, you're going to bring everybody in, play some upbeat Italian music. And I bet, after time, they'll hear a song and they'll say, oh, it must be time for bocce. And what you'll notice is people will get excited, and you might end up having more people, participate. So that's just, one example. Another example, having a food program. It could be, a cooking group, or it could be just a discussion about a food and the origins of it. Well, why not play, songs about food while everybody's coming in? I mean, you'd be surprised how many great songs there are that mention food. Brown Sugar by the Rolling Stones. Weird Al Yankovic's I Love Rocky Road, Strawberry Fields Forever. And if you have a younger audience, they might, get really excited if you play some more modern songs too. And that's, just another tip.
Yeah.
And one other example, the horse racing games. Now they've been around forever, since I started in the field, probably in 1989. But one way to make your horse racing game just a little bit more exciting is to play songs that are associated with horse racing, like the Lone Ranger theme song. Spotify even has an audio file of trumpets that you play before a horse race. Well, why not, play that right before the race begins? These are just little tips, just small things, tweaks really, that you could do to bring it to another level.
I like it.
The Italian cooking playlist on Spotify is fantastic if you need some fun Italian music.
Exactly.
I think that's a really good point, because I think it not only looking at just the music, but I think a lot of the times we've heard people say, all of these old activities, quote unquote old activities, we shouldn't do anymore. We need to do different things. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, right? Because it's what the residents want and it's what they like, but it's reimagining how you're actually doing it. And so not just looking at the same old bingo or the same old horse racing game or, any of these things, but how do we elevate that kind of to that next level is how we all should be looking at things. And then, Matthew, to your point, it's like, how do we bring technology in to also elevate that? We don't want to replace it because everybody still wants some of these things. But I think those are really good points that, we 10 years ago, right, you didn't have Spotify to get this music and make those things easy. And so I think it's looking at all those facets to really elevate the programming to that next level is super key. So I'm going to kind of jump around. Matthew, anything else you want to kind of plug in there about just reimagining that resident experience?
I want to circle back to a little note that Erin dropped in there that was super important that I liked. And it was, I forget how she termed it, but it was basically, she was talking about getting feedback along the way. And I want to touch on just how important that is. As Don was mentioning these examples and introducing music as a complement to these other activities that you may be offering, what she's really talking about is running a little experiment. That's really near and dear to my heart, language I like to talk about as an enterprise builder. And it's deeply ingrained in what we do at Activity Connection is run little experiments, but always be judging performance honestly so that we can rate the success and calibrate and make changes. So that feedback that she mentioned, I equate that to scorecarding. And you can scorecard that on a personal basis. You can scorecard that at a program basis for a group event and judge success or failure, not just to scrape it off the list of activities, but to improve it that next time. Or maybe form a realization of, it just doesn't work that well when we offer it like this. And maybe we should offer it like this instead. I could think of an example where that feedback would be so key. I would be curious to know how folks that we're caring for feel truly about, let's say, painting with their finger on a tablet versus doing a true watercolor painting. I would love to hear that feedback. What do they think about the technology-based version compared to, like you mentioned, Nick, the old style of activity, the known good watercolor that we can go to and do some painting. So great point, Aaron. Just a quick note I wanted to make: scorecarding, judging performance. It doesn't matter if it's activities in life enrichment or the executive levels of running an enterprise. It's just vital to calibrating and ensuring that you're on the right path.
Right? I really think that I totally agree with you. I think that data collection and basing our programming on actual data from the residents and participation and all that feedback, if we could digitize that and really utilize that in programming, I think that's going to be the future of our industry. I think the technology piece of that is so key. I know a lot of my staff are still taking attendance on paper and trying to utilize that. It's hard. It's very clunky. I love the idea of having the technology in place to be able to print out a visual of how successful your programs were that month. And this is my dream for our company, is to have that in place so that we are actually programming based on evidence and not guessing.
I know.
I love that.
So, but yeah, and I mean, we'll talk a little bit more to that in a minute too. But I want to jump into some of these questions because we do have a lot of really good questions coming through. And so one thing I wanted to touch on first is we got a question kind of just about the funding aspect of it, and kind of question and comment, but about a lot of money flowing into marketing, sales, et cetera, over programming, right? And how, if we looked at allotting those dollars in kind of different ways, how, they can work together, right? So I think stuff that we've talked to our clients about, because, we at LifeLoop are an engagement platform, we do the tracking and such that Aaron's talking about. But I think we miss the mark sometimes in the communities of how much this technology and programming plays a part into sales and marketing. So I think having a plan to go, to your teams, right, through this budgeting process with, the kind of evidence that you can give to them saying, hey, if we can work this together, this is going to be a success for both sides of this. And so I think, just trying to reimagine that piece of it can be super powerful to bring that funding kind of back into the activities portion, or, designating it as something else, but it's something that you guys utilize, right? Technology across the board is not just an engagement or activities budget item that should be, allocated across all budgets. So I think that's a super important piece within there.
Huge. Mm-hmm. It's huge. I could go off on a big tangent on that one, Nick. That really hits home for me. I'll ask the group a question here. If you're not marketing about your activities, engagement, and enrichment services, what are you marketing about?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question.
And if you turn the lens on that, then your marketing budget, that big marketing budget that we know most all organizations have, should be allocated to support world-class activities, engagement, and enrichment services, because that's what you want to market. That's what the families of those loved ones who are paying for you to care for them want to hear. So they know that that's how that person's spending their each day in your care. And I just wonder, because I hear this so common as feedback from our subscribers, the challenge of budget allocation. I don't know if folks saw my social media before this, but this is really a point that I wanted to drive home, because I want to be a change agent in this industry with others speaking a consistent message of the importance of elevating the activity and enrichment budgets in our senior living communities around the country, around the world, is what I want to do. it's vital that these are funded effectively, appropriately, that they include not just the traditional budget, but like we've touched on, budget for technology, right? And how do you get there? Well, you have to be thinking about a larger spend than I think that we traditionally have in this industry. And it really gets into, it's a completely, it's no judgment and not to paint with too broad a brush. But the misconception is that, what is happening at times in the industry is folks are robbing their activities budget to feed a marketing budget.
Yeah.
I think that's backwards thinking. I think we can do better. And I'd like to help push the industry towards thinking about what, in fact, you're actually marketing and how your marketing can be successful if you approach it a different way.
I think along with that, we have to consider funding for staff in activities and wellness. Like, we want to
absolutely.
We want to be considered professionals. We want to be part of the healthcare team. Yeah. I think we need to think of activity professionals in that way going forward, not just, pulling somebody off the street to do programming because it's easy. It's not easy. It's a very difficult job. And I think
100%.
I would like to see us treat it as such.
Yeah. Well, I think
I totally agree, Erin. In fact, as I was preparing for this talk today, I thought about the many changes that we've seen in activities since, the late 80s when I started in the profession. And the skills that are needed today to do activities are very different than the skills were needed, 15 years ago. And so we're expected to have, greater skills, be better at things, but the salaries have not increased.
Yeah.
So, I would love to see that, get caught up and pay people appropriately.
Agree.
Absolutely. It's so deserved.
I think it's looking at, I think we segment, the budgets, the departments way too much, right? And so it's looking at how we can just all work together to, really enhance this experience, right? At the end of the day, everybody within a community is part of the resident experience, resident engagement team, no matter what they're doing. And I think the more that we can kind of communicate that and get that out there is going to be extremely powerful. And kind of that goes into another kind of question comment that I think is good to hit on. To someone mentioned that we don't think the activities and budgets and such will change until this area is better valued, by the government, which is a very good comment, right? Because it's not part of the payment system and things like this. So I think to what Erin was mentioning earlier and what we discussed is, how do we show that what we're doing from an engagement perspective is actually affecting the healthcare of that individual, right? I think when we can really start to bring those two things together, we have a really good case of why there should be, money that is allocated into these budgets. If you, to break it down, right? If we can get people, more engaged to live longer and live a higher quality of life, this also is going to, improve census, keep your length of stays longer, and make those folks the money that they're looking to make as well, right? So, I mean, when it is a true healthcare issue and something that we need to look at, it can flow into those other areas, right? You're going to have a satisfactory sales team that's looking at that if we can do those things. So again, I think it's bringing all of these departments together is going to be incredibly important moving forward. And technology is what we're going to need to utilize to show this, right? It's very objective currently. And we want to really quantify what is happening, in our communities. I want to touch real quick on another good question, because I think this is something that we've heard a lot too. So someone mentioned, lockdown or no lockdown, residents are now content with staying in their room a lot more. And so, what are kind of some tricks or, not tricks, but some things that we can offer to residents to get them moving again, get them out a little bit, right? So now we're talking about technology and things to drive to them, but how can we get some of those folks back to these things and back to in person? It's, how a lot of us look at work right now. It's all remote and we're content that way. But I think, how do we get back to some of those basics?
I think that it's taken a lot of time actually to see the residents really just get used to being out of their apartments again. I think in my mind, I thought they would come flooding out of their apartments once we were out of lockdown. But it's been pretty slow. Yeah. I think that things that have been really effective are outdoor activities, outdoor entertainment. We have put up huge tents over parking lots and done a lot of activities outside. Music is huge. We have people on staff that are talented that way, playing live music for the residents. We've done some outdoor professional entertainment. Those things have been big. We've noticed that the hallway exercise groups, they don't want to change that. They're really happy with their little neighborhood exercise groups, so we're continuing that. The dining services going back to normal has helped a lot because they're not getting meal delivery. But yeah, it was surprising to me. I think we all got a little bit used to it. So again, that one-on-one connection, some people, don't like group activities and never have. And so I think maybe now we know who those people are and we're going to be better about engaging them where they are. So it's not always a bad thing, but yeah, it's been a struggle for all of us.
Yeah, it's looking at engaging those folks a little bit differently, but it doesn't negate the need for engagement, right? Just because they're content that way, we don't need to force them into these large groups, but offering these smaller things that they can do or these one-on-ones and such. Yeah. I think is super important.
And I don't think you have to, have your calendar crammed full of stuff. I think if you do 2 or 3 great things a day, then, you'll find out what people want to do.
Yeah, I agree with that, Erin. The only thing I'd like to add is if they're coming out for meals, you might want to consider doing, an activity immediately following the meal or immediately before the meal if they're waiting to get into the dining room. And by doing that, it might remind them what they used to enjoy about being out of the room. Or you might want to think about having a scavenger hunt and doing something where they have to come out of the room to look and learn about things in the hallway. That might be another way to get them to come out.
Very good. So a couple more kind of pieces on some of the marketing and how we can kind of bring these things together. We're getting a handful of questions on these, but Erin, looking at you, and I know we're kind of going to you because you're the one who's in the trenches here, but engaging prospects in some of your activities, wellness programs, and things like that. How do you guys approach that?
That's been working really well for us with vitality and sales have close relationship, obviously. We always say, if you don't have vitality, what are you marketing? Because the buildings are, they can be beautiful or not beautiful, but they're, it's not that different. But I think the vitality activities program is what can really drive sales. So a lot like this week, we've had our sales director come to me and say, hey, I have a prospect who wants to come to this. We had a big outdoor bingo event. Can they make a reservation? Yeah. So they help us know who the prospects are that are interested, and then they'll call me or we'll invite them. And I think that is a great way to market because they really get to know the other residents and what the culture is like. And I love doing that.
That's a great story. You should be tapped into as part of sales and marketing that way. I believe that wholeheartedly. And I think that's just one representation of, I wrestled with a similar challenge before in a different field. I started my career in IT. And I don't want to compare IT to activities and life enrichment because it's so different. But when I was a younger professional in IT, I had a very difficult time getting funding to grow my team to support whichever business I worked for effectively. It was a traditional challenge. And the reason was, I think it's similar. It's the folks I answered to viewed IT departments or support departments as a cost center because they're not selling those services. But the conversation I had for years with folks to help change that perspective was, no, it's not in fact a cost center. It is a strategic value center. And that's what you just described. Your Vitality program was just leveraged in a strategically valuable way to try to close a deal on the front end on the sales side. And if we can constantly lean into that perspective, activities and enrichment services as a strategic value center for your senior living community, we can elevate that field. We can elevate that. The strategic value center that plays into closing deals and so much more. I know that we can get there with consistent messaging. Over time, I've seen it happen in other fields, and I hope that it takes hold here with what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important, right? Of how, again, just tying these all together and understanding, what comes out of each piece of this and what the mission is and what we're really trying to do, right? I mean, getting back to that idea that the resident experience is the number one thing that a community is here for, right? It's that and their health, and they're tied together very closely, closer than we probably ever thought, and learning that more and more each day. So a couple quick, I guess, points that I do want to hit on before we jump off, because time flies and it's almost the end here. But so one person asked, they're already right now not allowed to do any group programs, and are doing things basically in room, in the hall. They're asking kind of first, any other ideas besides kind of the sports or exercise bingo, crafts on the iPad and things like that. Any other creative things, and this is for kind of anybody to answer that you guys have seen, that we can offer to the group here today?
Dawn, do you want to?
Yeah. One thing, you could do daily challenges or weekly challenges where you give them a challenge. It could be, doing something if they have to be in their room, it could be having them organize, one of their drawers. It could be a random act of kindness. They could call somebody on the phone to check on them. You can really make it however you want it to be. It's just something a little different to break up the monotony. And, hopefully you'll get buy-in.
I love that. That's fantastic.
That challenge idea too. Like if you're the first person to fill out their bingo card or their exercise bingo card and put it outside their door, first
Right.
3 people get something, like trying to offer some incentive that way is sometimes fun for people who like competition.
Which we know a lot of them do, right?
Yes.
One of the biggest
Yes.
things. I mean, now more than ever, I think we can leverage that to really help them. Where I think sometimes competitions, it's not thought of in the best light, but in this area, I mean, it's fantastic, and what we need to be driving. Awesome. So we got kind of 2 minutes left. The questions that we did not get to, I will make sure that we get some answers to you guys, basically just through email and whatnot. So I will send those out after. But just wanted to get, basically any last things that that anybody on the panel here wants to mention or give advice for along the way.
I would just like to, I just want to say thank you to all of you that are working in this field. And I know it's probably been the roughest year of your careers. But I just want to offer my support. And I think, as we think of ourselves as professionals, I think it can make the job a little bit more fun if you are out there getting some, education and support either through ICAA or there's so many great resources on LinkedIn. People who are in this profession who are doing things a little differently, reading about fitness for older adults, doing a little exercise training for your staff. I think there's a lot of things we can do for each other to make the job a little bit more fun, a little more engaging, and, a little bit more attractive for professionals that want to work in the field.
Absolutely. Dawn, Matthew, any closing remarks you guys want to make?
Well, I agree with Erin. I think, I have a lot of activity professional contacts, And it's been a really rough, 18 months, and everyone is really dedicated and taking very good care of the residents. And it's just so important. You got to take care of yourself too. So, please, do that. Because if you don't take good care of yourself, you're not going to be able to keep bringing joy to all your residents.
That's so true. Thank you for saying that, Dawn. And Aaron, appreciate you giving your time for this and sharing such great insight. I think the only thing I'd like to add as a close is just that for those in attendance, that you're not alone in this, that we see you. We see you over here. We thank you for what you do every single day, caring for our loved ones in the ways that you do, enriching the lives of those you care for. And we thank you. We just feel that you are just unsung heroes out there during this whole pandemic, and even before the pandemic, just the work that you do each day. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Absolutely. And I cannot say that enough. And thank you to everybody for attending. And Matthew, Aaron, Dawn, thanks so much for jumping on this panel with me. If anybody in attendance, wants to be put in contact with anybody on the panel, please get in touch with us. We'll be sending out, like I said, an email after this that has the recording in it. So feel free to reach back out to me directly, and I can get you in contact with them. But yeah, anything that you all need, there's a lot of resources out there, and we're all here to help and in this together. So thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.